Hi, welcome back to our lectures on responding to world religions. We looked at first at why we should study religions, why it's important to study religions, and we looked last time then at a definition of religion. And now I want to point out the 7 dimensions of religion. These come from a book that Ninian Smart wrote, but it's an excellent way of looking at different religions and trying to identify how how those religions fit into these 7 dimensions that I think are pretty universal for all religions. And so the first dimension is the doctrinal dimension, or a systematic formulation of the religion and examples of doctrine. And again, as a Christian, this is easy to find as we look at church history throughout the ages, and we see how doctrine has been developed. And of course, as an evangelical Christian, looking at the Word of God, the Old Testament and the New Testament, as the source of that doctrine. But a Roman Catholic, for instance, would look at the Catechism as the source of doctrine. Then there's narratival, or stories of the religion. And these would include stories that might be written down someplace. They could also even be oral stories that are passed on from generation to generation. Or again, looking at Christianity, sometimes we use the idea of testimony, these stories connected with the religion. For some religions, like Hinduism, for instance, story is a major part of even the doctrinal portion of the religion. Then there's ethical rules or behavioral guidelines. Many times these will be written down someplace. Sometimes, however, again, they're passed on from generation to generation, or they simply become part of the unspoken, in a sense, tradition. You can see this maybe in a church. You can see this sometimes, perhaps even if you go to a mosque. These are ethical norms that are considered tradition. They may or may not have a foundation in the holy writings of that religion. Connected then with ethical and what you do in behaviors also then is ritual, what you do during religious ceremonies. And these ceremonies, of course, many times will take place in a place of worship for that religion, but not necessarily. Some of the rituals are not associated with a place of worship. However, of course, it's usually easiest to discover them, easiest to notice them when they take place in whatever that place of worship might be, whether it's a church or a mosque or a synagogue or a temple or a home even. And then there's experiential. And so this is kind of more connecting with the emotions that are impacted as a result of the religious experience, perhaps especially, but not only. So experiential means experience, but it's also really connected with the emotions. And I say this because these emotions might come as a result of, for instance, reading the holy writings or listening to a prophet speak. Not necessarily from something that we ourselves are doing, but the emotions that are awakened inside of us. Then there's the institutional dimension of religion. It's this communal system that unites everybody in a particular religion, and it gives them rules for identifying who's a member and who's not, or encouraging people to be part of that particular religion. And these institutional components, many times as well, have a strong basis in tradition. Sometimes they'll be quantified in some way, they'll be written down, like, for instance, with a statement of faith, or again with the catechism. Sometimes they won't be, however. Sometimes it might be difficult to identify who's a member of that particular religion and who is not. But most religions have some way of identifying you're in or you're out. And this is part of that institutional component. Then there's the material dimension of religion. And so this is perhaps especially it's easiest to see when we think of objects that are connected with a religion. And so they might be a god, meaning a particular statue or something like that is worshipped. Or a crucifix, for instance, but actually, for Christians, sometimes even the Bible the book that is, becomes an object that is a material object connected with our religion. But material also refers to a place, places that are considered sacred by a particular religion, or things that symbolize the supernatural within that religion. So these 7 dimensions, again, I'm going to go through them real quickly: doctrinal, narratival or story, ethical, ritual, experiential, and this is especially maybe emotional, institutional, and material. So as we look at different religions now through these lectures coming up, we'll also attempt to look at how these religions approach these 7 dimensions.